Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another show of Hot Topics, and this is your host, Greg Ochs. I happen to have a show today that probably will go in multiple series, and this is geared strictly for you, the parents of your children in Forest Lake area. I have three experts with us on staff today to talk about, and the question is, do you know what your kids are doing tonight? Do you know what your kids are doing at all? And I think that we will have a informative program, and I truly hope that you sit down and take the opportunity to view the information we're having. Now, if I may, I'd like to introduce my panel. I have Kathy Bystrom, Manager of Community Health Outreach Services at Fairview. In the center, I have Matt Howard, who is the Community Justice Program Manager for the Forest Lake Youth Service Bureau. And I have Detective Ashley Lavelle of Forest Lake Police Department. We're here to discuss drugs and also here to go over what to look for as a parent with your children. Kathy, why don't you give us an outline of what does it mean to be the Manager of Community Health Outreach Services at Fairview? That's a mouthful, so okay.
Greg, first of all, thanks for bringing us here today to discuss this important topic with the community. What it means to be a community health outreach manager for Fairview Lakes is that I have the honor of working in partnership with various sectors of the community to address a variety of health needs within the community, one of which is youth drug and alcohol prevention. We do a community health needs assessment, go through that process about every 3 years, and make some determinations about the things that we're going to address out in the community, and behavioral health, specifically mental health and drug and alcohol prevention surfaced and consistently surfaced, but in our last needs assessment cycle came right to the top.
Okay, just so all of our audience knows, if they don't recognize you, then they can see you a couple times a month on TV with the school board. And just so all of you know, Kathy is one of the Forest Lake School Board members. Matt, tell us a little bit about what your position is as Community Justice Program Manager.
Sure. The Lakes Area Youth Service Bureau has been around since 1976, so I was 1 year old when it started, but I've been in... Okay. I knew you'd laugh at that. Yeah. But I've been there for 14 years, and then this is going on my 15th year. And what does it mean to manage the community justice program? When you work in a nonprofit, you wear a lot of different hats, but one of the main ones that I wear is helping kids to get a second chance when they get into trouble, to avoid being in the court system itself. Both counties, Washington and Chisago, defer or divert youth to us to be able to complete a program. And a lot of times 50% of the time, it is around chemical citations. But it gives them a chance to get education, support, and they come with their parents to learn, to be accountable, move on, not be in trouble again, hopefully. And right around the ballpark of, it fluctuates, but it's 82% of our youth don't go back and contact the court system after they come to us. And so our job is to keep them from reoffending and to really educate and support them, help them be productive members in society. And so that's my primary job duty as the manager of the program. I do a lot of other things too.
I bet you do.
But we won't spend the time talking about those.
Thank you. Ashley, Detective Ashley, tell us a little bit of in the scope of the police department, what is your area of expertise and responsibility?
So I am part of the investigations unit. I've been there for about 3 years almost, and I pretty much coordinate all of the crime prevention activity and outreach that we do and community relations. So I work with businesses and property managers of multi unit properties and a lot of safety and kids and educating the public on crime prevention and safety.
Yeah, any of you can chime in, or you can all chime in. What is the drug of choice currently in Forest Lake and surrounding communities? Kathy, you want to start?
Alcohol.
Matt?
Alcohol.
Alcohol, yes.
Alcohol. Where does marijuana fit into the scope of this?
I'd say that's second in line.
Yep, second place.
And then what would be third?
You know, I would say probably a distant third would likely be prescription drugs.
Yeah. If you combine all the different categories of prescription drugs together, prescription drugs would come in third place as far as use.
Now, alcohol might be one that the police department has first line of defense on probably dealing with. On a given Friday or Saturday night, how many young adults, I'm going to say 21 and under, right now it could be 40 and under for my own thing, but anybody 21 and under, how often do you give citations for DWIs or illegal possession?
Illegal possession of alcohol.
Open bottle.
Yeah. You know, it's not as much, we don't deal as much with youth 21 and under as much as we deal with adults, of course, with alcohol use. But I'd say at least probably 5 to 10 citations maybe a month, depending on what month. Summer months are busier than the rest of the year, of course. But I'd say that's about average.
You had mentioned that adults are more of an issue. Is there a classification of age that generally is greatest offenders, or is there just a broad brushstroke across the board as far as?
Yeah, I'd say 20s and 30s are generally our biggest problem. A lot of times, maybe after bars or people that have parties in condensed living situations, such as apartments or townhouses. So those are generally occupied by people that are in their 20s and 30s. That's what generates most of the calls, a lot of loud parties or disturbances or disorderly conduct situations.
Matt, what is the age bracket that you generally deal with the Youth Service Bureau?
13 to 18, at least in the diversion program. And I would just corroborate or agree with the number that Ashley gave on the juvenile citations. I have a chemical class that runs each month, and it has 12 spots in it, and half of those come from Washington County each month. And so that would be about 6 juvenile citations that we would process from the northern part of Washington County. And then the other 6 would be from all of Chisago County.
Kathy, at what stage do you get involved, and at what area are you of a counselor, consultant type of thing to all the other programs? Where do you get involved with it?
Well, the bulk of my work is in prevention. So I'm not in the intervention treatment arena. I'm not in kind of the law enforcement or the enforcement arena, but I'm in the prevention arena. So I take a look at the data, I take a look at the underage consumption citations, I look at the work that Matt's doing, and then we work in partnership to create some strategies to prevent young people from getting there to begin with, to prevent youth from getting the underage citations, to prevent them from being diverted to Matt's programs, or even in a worst case scenario, having to go into treatment, long-term treatment.
When you say that you get involved with putting together a collaborative effort with whatever group it may be, when you bring forward the data, the group that you're getting involved with, how receptive are they to really grab this support and then run with it to actually get I don't want to say get the job done, but to get the information separated to the and to the proper units that need to be talked to.
Well, we have a multi-sector coalition, and the data behind community-led coalitions that are comprised of law enforcement, youth-serving agencies, healthcare, social service agencies, schools, faith communities. The research behind those multi-sector coalitions is clear. They can and do make an incredible impact in reducing and preventing youth drug and alcohol use. They're incredibly receptive. I don't know an individual, or at least many individuals, who want young people using drugs or alcohol at any level. You know, they certainly can get into trouble with adults who are serving, oftentimes young adults, you know, 20s, 30s, providing alcohol to minors or drugs to minors. But the bulk of the people that I work with don't want drugs and alcohol in our community at all, not in our schools, not in our community at all. So everybody's extremely receptive to being involved in the prevention realm as we're working to prevent and reduce youth drug and alcohol use.
You know, Kathy, I bet a lot of the viewers, when we talk about a collaborative, they don't know what the names of those collaboratives would be.
That was my next question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, can you give some examples of? Because you're on all of them, almost all of them, I think.
Well, we have a lot of collaboratives in the Forest Lake area, and actually in my entire service area. Forest Lake Area Partnership for Families has been in existence in the Forest Lake community for 25 years, and they actually led the charge 25 years ago in response to the Minnesota Student Survey in addressing youth drug and alcohol use in the community. We have a couple of subsets of that organization. One is the Suicide Prevention Collaborative that works primarily on youth mental health issues and suicide prevention, but are kind of expanding their efforts into the adult population and the military population.
Oh, that's a huge one.
It is.
That's a huge one.
And the adult population is too, frankly, because that's where the greatest upward trend in suicide is happening, typically middle-aged adult males. And then, of course, we have MOST FL, the Most Drug-Free Communities Coalition that we have, which is the basis for the work that we're doing in this community. And I have the honor of co-chairing that with Matt, and Ashley is a very active partner in the work, particularly in coordinating law enforcement efforts with the Most FL Drug-Free Communities Coalition. In a typical month with that group, we probably have 20, 25 people at the table, you know, that are discussing strategies to prevent and reduce youth drug and alcohol use in our community. In addition to that, we have about 30 or so folks, businesses, organizations within the community that have identified themselves as community champions. You can see the Most FL Champion banner behind us. LATV is one of those champions. But we have 30 to 35 champions who are behind the work of our team. We want a healthy community for our kids, and we're going to work together to ensure that happens.
Now, with the organizations that you're involved with, and then is there a lot of crossover among each one of them? And how do you decipher? And I do want to get back to the mental health one. That's something that's really near and dear. And I do not have a relative, but I do have some very good friends that have needed mental health, and they were not able to find any. So when in addressing that, what and as far as the crossovers do, a lot of the people that are on one of the committees on more than one of the committees. Is that common?
Yeah. Like the Lakes Area Youth Service Bureau has different people on different committees. And so we try to overlap the different staff areas to be getting involved on those different committees. And I know the PD has different representation too, different officers on different committees.
Does Ashley, I know that you're active in the community and doing presentations to the various groups and things like that. How is it received when you're talking to a group of high school kids, and how does it received when they're junior high and then getting down into elementary? What is their reception of it, and what would you say, how can you tell the differential of mindset and maturity?
Well, we have 3 school resource officers, so in Forest Lake. So Southwest Junior High, Century Junior High, and the high school all each have their own school resource officer. So generally when they ask for any type of education from the police department, they utilize their school resource officers before I would go into their schools. But I do get into the elementary schools with the 5th graders each year and do teach them drug education. And I could really tell them the sky is purple, and they would just really soak that in. So I don't know the differences between...
Grab those little rascals.
I know, and they love it, and it's very rewarding for both of us to go in there and just have that relationship by the time they're getting into older grades, and just interacting with them at that level is just really important for us and them.
Yeah, Greg, I can tell you that in teaching the classes over the last decade, that it's that middle school age up to about 8th grade when the awareness is relatively small or minor about chemicals. The experimenting isn't really prevalent, but as soon as you hit that 9th grade mark, and even in Forest Lake where 9th grade is still part of the middle schools and not at the high school, 9th grade is where the awareness kind of comes in to play for the kids, and that's where we see the use rates starting to increase as well.
Yeah, you do see use rates grow exponentially between 5th and 8th grade, and then 8th and 11th grade. When we examine the Minnesota Student Survey data, we're really trying to focus on not only our concentrated work that we're doing at the high school level, but creating strategies that kind of trickle down into those younger age groups as well. And that's the prevention piece. So the more we can work at that lower level, the less likely we are to see those numbers growing exponentially as kids get older.
One of the things I do want to get back to, I told you I want to get back to suicide and with the military. Mm-hmm. Where and how can someone get some help on that? Because that's a very big issue.
Well, I think if it's a crisis situation, there are crisis lines that they can call. The 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255, I believe is the number, is the National Suicide Prevention number. And that usually routes them back to Canvas Health's local crisis connection hotline, so that they're able to tap into resources on a local level here. Even though they're calling a national number, it routes them back into the area, so they're able to find resources for them on a local level. There's no question about it, Greg, access to mental health resources is really a challenge. We've done a lot of work in prevention in that area as well. And we've done a lot of work in stigma reduction. We're trying to encourage both youth and adults that mental health issues are nothing to be ashamed of. They're biological in nature. The brain can get sick just like other parts of the body.
And not heal itself.
And not heal itself without some help. There are
Right.
some chemical issues that are going on there typically. Sometimes it is tough. It's tough to find access to those resources in a timely way. I oftentimes will encourage folks to see a primary care physician because they can typically see them much sooner than they can a counselor. Most often a combination, depending upon the mental illness and kind of the issue at hand, a combination of Medication and therapy is the most effective, not just one or not just another, but a combination of the two, and ensuring that individual has a tremendous amount of social support as well. And then they focus on better physical health. So healthy eating, increases in physical activity, all of those mental health promotion strategies improve mental health.
Well, you know what's interesting too is that undiagnosed and untreated mental illness actually is a risk factor for chemical use. So to kind of bring the conversation back around to your hot topic, it ties directly, mental health ties directly into chemical use because kids and adults alike will start using chemicals to manage their depression or their PTSD or anxiety.
What is PT?
Post-traumatic stress disorder, like the vets coming back. It's not limited just to vets, but going through any traumatic experiences, short-term or long-term. But undiagnosed mental health and untreated mental health issues are one of the major risk factors for chemical use. Because we'll see kids, it's hard to put any kind of statistic on it, but there are kids that in our classes, when we go and look at the different risk factors that put kids at a higher risk for using, it always does come up, depression or mental health stuff, and it's real. It's there.
It's a serious issue.
And we call that self-medicating. So instead of trying to do it in a more holistic way or under the care of a physician or a mental health professional, people will start using drugs or alcohol. And what they don't realize is that self-medicating typically makes their situation worse. It doesn't make it better, but in their immediate world and in their mind, it does. It does make them feel better. It kind of takes them away from those other things that are bothering them, but it doesn't get to the heart of the matter.
That's
it doesn't
right.
get to the root cause.
Does not.
With teenagers, you actually see that a lot more with marijuana. Marijuana is typically used to self-medicate for when kids have ADHD or anxiety, frustration, even depression. They'll turn to marijuana as a means of coping. I do a program called Teen Intervene where it's just one-on-one talking with kids about why they're using, what's your motivation for using, and that's on there. I mean, the kids are just trying to feel good and feel normal, and they don't know how to connect to a counselor or get the kind of help that they really need.
And they don't have healthier coping skills,
Yeah.
Well,
to deal with what they're experiencing. And that's oftentimes, or a lot of times, why you will see kids in what we call a dual treatment program, because they're addressing their chemical use and their mental health issues at the same time. So, because you can't address one without the other.
Without the other. Ashley, when a youth, let's say 16 to 18 as what was described in the, and gets picked up and gets a DWI, at what point do then they meet Matt?
So with law enforcement, we are very reactive. As soon as that situation has come to a conclusion that evening or that day, there's not a lot of follow-up that the police department does as far as what happens next. So a lot of times kids ask, well, what's going to happen to me now? Or am I going to be in a lot of trouble? And, things like that we don't have the answers to, because what happens is it literally leaves our desk and goes down to the court system or youth service bureau and things like that. So we don't have a lot of follow-through. So as far as what was the question?
Well, what mine was is when you have issued a citation for a minor in possession or driving a DWI, whatever the police department has issued, at what point then does it get back to Matt?
Right.
That's what I'm trying to see how the system flows.
So our interactions generally last maybe from 15 minutes to maybe a couple hours. Generally, if it's somebody under 18 years old, we have to make sure that they are with their parent or some other trusting adult, responsible adult. And after they're out of our hands or out of our responsibility, we finish up the paperwork and then it gets passed on. So we're limited as far as our interactions with them, and the follow through. We might get a letter a few months later saying they completed their programming with Youth Service Bureau, or this is what happened when they went to court.
Okay, so then after the citation, whatever it is, then the judge would then refer them to you? Is that how you get the clients?
Most of the time, the judge will never have to see it. And where like Ashley's citation or a patrol officer citation would go to the desk in the county attorney's office where they review it, and they say, is this youth eligible for diversion or not? Have they had any prior offenses? And if so, then they probably would have to go to court, and a judge would see them. But if not, then they can be routed through diversion, and then we would get that referral, which includes the police citation attached to it, probably a week after the citation took place. And then we start calling the family. But if they have a court date, that could be a month or 2 months out.
Oh, sure.
You know, so that's how it kind of...
The delay could be 90 days or whatever.
For court, yeah.
Yeah, for court.
For diversion, it's almost immediate.
I see. Okay, and then you make an effort to get to the parents. What has historically been the reception the parents have? Because so often I didn't tell my parents anything. I mean, they found out the hard way when they pulled my driving record. Then they found out that because they got their car insurance canceled. That's how it all happened. But
Things are a little different these days.
I think so. Back then, they didn't have a computer either. Everything was handwritten.
As soon as a citation is issued, they actually, if it's a chemical citation, the school district is notified for all of the sports and extracurricular activities. Because the youth.
Ooh, that's nasty.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nasty.
Yeah, the youth sign and the parents sign those agreements when they enter those activities.
Yes, they do.
I totally lost my train of thought. But yeah, it was gone.
Okay,
What
when
were
the
you asking?
parents and the youth
Yeah, the
sign the sworn affidavit that they will not consume alcohol.
What's the parents' response?
Are they receptive?
Mixed. It's a mixed bag. It really is. I'd say probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, the parents are just glad that they didn't have to go to court. They want their kids to just learn from the experience. They wonder why they have to kind of bear some of the responsibility or burden to be bringing them into the classes, and
Really? Yeah. Okay.
It's a legitimate question. I didn't do anything wrong. My youth made a bad decision, and we've given them consequences at home. We're good parents. Why do we have to be here for this? But we assure them that we couldn't do it without them, and that they're the expert in their child, and that we need them. And they go, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay."
I think it's not about judging their
No,
parenting
it is
skills
not.
at
No.
all. It's about saying good kids can make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
And kids of good parents can make mistakes, and we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And let's work together to keep it from happening again.
Yeah, that's how we run our programming. It's very, very friendly to the parents because it's strength. We want to pull all of the strengths out of the family and say, is there anything that can be strengthened even more, or is this just a pat on the back and keep doing the great stuff you're doing, and hopefully the youth learns.
What happens to the ticket?
The
It
ticket
gets paid. Does it stay on the record?
doesn't get paid in the youth's case. It doesn't stay on any type of court record. The county has it on record that they completed a diversion, and so if they were to get in trouble again, it would be there in the paperwork, a completed diversion, but there's no court file, there's no number, and so it's the next one that would become the official juvenile record.
I see. Okay, so it's just kind of forgotten.
No, yes and no.
Well, they go through the system, they go through the program, and then they got the slate is clean, and keep it that way, or else you're in
Right.
in hot water.
Right.
I think a bigger question here is, where are they getting the substances they're using? And in the case of alcohol, typically all roads lead to adults, usually.
Seriously? Ooh.
Absolutely. Well, if you think about it, even if they get it from friends, those friends have gotten it somewhere. And sometimes it can be a parent's liquor cabinet. Sometimes it can be an older sibling who's of legal age. Typically, all of those roads lead to adults. And so it's critical for us when we're trying to prevent underage alcohol use to look at the ways
Access.
kids are accessing those substances, whether it's alcohol or marijuana or whatever it is, and address those environmental issues as well. And Ashley's done a tremendous amount of work with some kind of rules and regulations within the Forest Lake area community, specifically a social host ordinance, and I'll let her talk about that a little bit more. But some of those strategies are working as well.
Yeah, what's a social host ordinance?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
So,
what is that?
Forest Lake has, as of 2010, the city of Forest Lake passed a social host ordinance. And basically what it is, it's to hold the person responsible for hosting an underage party. So a lot of parents have a misconception that it's holding the parents responsible. So for example, if they were down on a trip and their child had a party at home, they feel like under the social host ordinance that they would be held responsible even though they didn't know about it, which isn't the case. It's actually holding their child responsible because they hosted the party where they knew that there was underage drinking happening. So it's a misdemeanor. So you can be fined up to $300 and
Per
90 days in
child
jail.
or per kid or per
Yeah,
parent?
for a host.
For a host.
So if the police were involved in an underage party, the host could be cited for a social host violation, and then the rest of them for underage consumption. So we've had success utilizing it. We had last summer we had a house in Forest Lake, and we've actually been typically the person has been going to jail in addition to getting cited for the social host ordinance. So we take it seriously. We don't want these kids to be leaving or getting hurt or drinking to the point of intoxication and making bad decisions. So we really take it seriously at Forest Lake, and we're hoping to spread it to all the communities around in the Forest Lake School District. So.
Matt, you had mentioned something a little bit ago, and I was going to want to get back to that. After the parents get past the embarrassment, okay? After they get past the embarrassment,
Yeah.
how often do you see that the parents are informed of some, what do I want to say, thoughts that the kids have concerning the parents that they all of a sudden go, really? I never thought about that from your perspective. How often does that happen?
Let me ask a clarifying question. Do you mean how often do the parents find out how the kids feel about them?
Well, not necessarily
Or
feel about them, but necessarily
they're learning something new about their
their
child.
kid that they never knew before.
Not as often as you might think. Most of the parents are pretty on top of knowing what's going on in their kids' lives, even if they're a little bit in the dark on some of the specifics. The parents nowadays are getting a little more hip to Facebook and social media and kind of staying in touch with their kids. I mean, there's always the exceptions, but I've never had kind of the total shock and surprise in my office. It's pretty rare. Most parents are like, well, I was pretty certain something was happening, and maybe the communication wasn't so great, but they knew. It's pretty rare that it's an aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But the parents' opinion matters, I think, where their kids are concerned.
You're absolutely right.
The kids will tell us over and over and over again. When you ask them, what are some of the reasons why you don't decide to do to use alcohol, drugs, whatever that substance may be. And typically their number one response is, I don't want to disappoint my parents.
Mm-hmm. They don't tell their parents that.
They don't tell their parents that, no. But that's the power of parents.
Yeah.
They don't want to disappoint their parents. And then there are other things too. They're involved in sports or other activities. They don't want to compromise those sorts of things. They don't want to compromise, their reputation, any number of things. But parents are typically number one on the list.
Yeah, I mean, if I could talk directly to any parents watching this, is that if you have teenagers, they'll never tell you that your opinion of them really matters. But it does. It still carries a lot of weight. I mean, you might get eye rolls and, why do you hate me and just leave me alone, you're embarrassing. But your opinion matters. And so if you hold your expectations high for them, they will generally try to meet them. And if you just remove all expectations because you think that they just don't care about you anymore, or they really are looking to you to set the bar, and then they'll generally meet you where you are. And so you still have a ton of influence. Don't give it up.
That's a very good statement.
Yeah.
That might be the best statement of the whole show. And I tell you what, I do agree with you, because now my kids, I got grandkids that are almost 20. So, I mean, we're moving along.
Oh,
and
when did that happen, Greg?
I know. That's what I was trying to figure out. How did that happen? All of a sudden, he's at 19 at Winona State. But my own kids have told my wife. They haven't told me. Mm-hmm. They said the biggest thing we were concerned about is we didn't want Dad to be disappointed with us.
Right.
And I go, you never know. You're taking your walk through life and you're doing your best. And many of us never had any, we didn't have a good book you read and said, oh, when this happens, you do this. And when, you kind of, everybody's flying by the seat of your pants. And to have that come out now that they're adults and they, and I go, hey, just remember, apples don't fall far from trees. I don't wish you the same thing, but it'll really make me feel good. So, but anyways, those kind of things, that is a very significant thing. And another thing I like to add to it is that many times kids there's a lot of kids that don't have a parent that is a parent, but they look to someone else for that, to have somebody be a parent to them. And I tell the audience, embrace it, because these kids are here, and next thing you know, they're grown and gone, and you go, why didn't I do that? It's you can't use the excuse we're all way too busy, even though we are. You always got time for that. So, that's the important thing.
They're watching. They're watching us as adults. And it should be no surprise that, as they get older and the peers become more and more of a factor for them, and the peer involvement, and they push away from parents and family members more and more, that you start to see use rates ticking up. And part of the work that we're trying to do with most FL is the kids' perception of their peer use rates is much greater than actual youth rates.
I think this poster here may be something that should significantly be looked at. I think that's,
Well, kids tend to over-perceive the prevalence of use of drugs and alcohol among their peers. And when they do that, that can impact their behavior negatively. For example, if a person walks into a party thinking that the majority of the kids in that party are drinking or smoking marijuana,
or stoned, whatever,
they're much more likely to succumb to what Matt has so eloquently coined self-imposed peer pressure. It's not that the pressure is being put on them by their peers necessarily. Some of that happens too, but rarely. It's more of a self-imposed pressure. When they're in this environment where they perceive use is happening, they're much more inclined to succumb to that use. So with most FL, what we try to do is take a look at the actual use rate data. For example, and I'm just going to throw a statistic out here kind of randomly, and would want a chance to qualify it with actual statistics. Kids will report that in the past 30 days, 70% of them have not used alcohol, but they perceive exactly the opposite, that 70% of their peers have used alcohol. So there's this huge gap between actual use rates and perception of use rates, and that can negatively impact behavior. And so with Most FL, we're trying to correct that perception and empower teenagers to make healthier choices. We're trying to show them that, you know what, most of your peers are making good choices.
Yeah.
And we want you to as well. So.
And it's a hard sell at first. I know Ashley can attest to this, but in my classes, when I tell the folks, 70% of the high school is not drinking alcohol each month, there's just an audible gasp. Everybody says,
No way.
They're lying. That can't be. Everyone drinks.
I would say that that's probably the perception I would get. If I read that in the Forest Lake Times, I'd read that and go, what are they on?
Something's wrong. Something's wrong with the survey, or they're not. No one's telling the truth. But really, the kids are reporting this, and they're reporting it in a consistent fashion, kind of year in and year out. There's no wild fluctuations that would suggest lying, or and it's a really well put together, scientifically constructed study, not totally anonymous. No youth has ever gotten in trouble for reporting that they used, and the kids all know that. But it takes them a little while to grapple with the whole concept that most kids aren't, because they think that most kids are.
In a group, I'd say that everybody does.
Yeah.
Because of the peer pressure. But if you get one-on-one and go, oh, I haven't had a beer for so long.
Yeah, you ask them individually.
Yeah, well, but here's a good example of that. When my daughter, who's now 28, was in 9th grade, she said to me, she made that statement to me. She was hanging out with a group of friends and made that statement to me, everybody's doing it. Everybody's drinking. And I said, well, are you? And she said, no. And I had confidence that she was not. We'd had a lot of conversations about that. And of course, in my line of work and my, probably affiliation in the community, she's a little, more hesitant to get into trouble. Yeah.
Front page headline.
But so I said to her, no. And then I just looked at her friends, each one at a time. And I said, well, are you? Are you? Are you? And over again, each one of them said no. And there were probably 15 to 20, that she was hanging with at the time. And I said, well, then how can you say most kids are? I'm looking at one group of kids right here, none of which are using alcohol right now. And so she started, and her friends kind of started to think about that. And that's really conceptually what this is all about as well, is you're perceiving something's happening, but you're probably misperceiving that. So let's correct that misperception.
Does that hold true for boys?
Boy use rates are higher, definitely across the board. Yep. No doubt about it. Alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, we're seeing a lot of issues with chew tobacco in particular, with teenage males.
Most of the chemicals are fairly close, with boys using more, and then tobacco, the gap is much bigger. Boys used
tobacco?
Boys used a lot more tobacco than girls.
Yeah. The perception of risk and harm among boys is less as well. They perceive risk a lot less than girls do. And we're not quite sure what's going on there. And that is kind of a good message for parents as well. Are you communicating as much to your boys about these issues as you are to your girls? Is that an issue? We don't really know, and we need to dig a little deeper to figure out why that's happening. But that would be one theory.
My theory is that girls are smarter than boys all the way along.
I would say to a certain age, I think that's true.
Oh no, even now.
I don't think so.
Are you married?
45 years worth. But we have two different areas of expertise too. We're two areas of different. But she couldn't do what I do. She couldn't take the pressure, the hassles. But yet, I have no desire to get involved with that, because I was in the political arena and where she's involved, and I got out because I couldn't take it anymore. You know, so I mean, we both have different areas.
It's more
But-
developed. I'm joking a little bit.
I
but
know that.
It's more developmental, where boys are more prone to risk-taking behavior, more impulsivity, and that's a brain development thing, really.
Oh, she would. My wife would.
I was hoping you'd grab
Yeah.
that segue in.
Yeah.
Hey, my wife would agree to that because I'm the one that says, you know, all of a sudden on a Saturday afternoon, hey, let's take off and go down over here. And she goes, do you really want to? The weather is this, is that, and this. I go, so what? We'll take the rain gear. We'll take whatever. You know.
Yeah. Which kind of, if we can segue into how chemicals do negatively affect the teenage brain. Because there are kids that are using. Most kids aren't, and that's a message that we are championing and wanting to push forward, but there are still some kids that are, and what are they putting at risk? And you know, what should the parents out there know about what these chemicals do? What can they be looking for, and what should they be trying to protect their kids from? And I would just maybe start off by saying that the teenage brain, especially this front part here, the frontal lobe, where a lot of executive functioning happens, like thinking ahead, what am I going to do next? What's going to happen if I do this? How is this going to impact my mom or my future? That all happens here, and that front part isn't quite developed yet. And so when you're putting chemicals into that brain that's not developed, which is like wet cement, it's very impressionable. And so as you put chemicals in there and you've got all your brain cells trying to wire together more permanently, and if they're being influenced by chemicals, they're going to either not wire together the way you want them to, or not wire together at all in some instances. So you actually are going to be limiting capacity. For instance, like with marijuana, there's a study done. If you want to look it up at home on Google, type in Meyer, M-E-I-E-R, 2012, New Zealand, marijuana. If you use all those keywords, Meyer, 2012, New Zealand, marijuana. It's a great study that showed the average IQ drop of people when they started using marijuana in adolescence compared to when they were in their 30s. It was a study done that followed people that long. On average, an 8-point IQ drop.
Is that a lot?
That's a lot.
That's huge. Yeah, that'll take you from a college IQ to a high school, or from a high school to a non-high school degree. Like that's the bigness of that 8 points. And so the people that start in adolescence, because their brains are so wet cement, actually diminish capacity for learning. But it's hard to explain that to teenagers and have them actually care.
Well, they're in the moment.
They're in the moment.
I think.
Sure
And there again, that's why parents are so critical to that prevention piece. Because while this part of the brain, that prefrontal cortex, is quiet, the emotional center of the brain is firing on all cylinders. So you've got, and then you throw in a few hormones, and you've got, you know, kind of this potential powder keg. So you've got, you've got low judgment. You've got
the perfect mom.
You know, exactly. You know, so that's why parents and other caring adults are so critical in the lives of teenagers, and so important in keeping them,
to say,
healthy.
I care about you so much,
right?
That I'm gonna keep you from using these chemicals. This is my expectation, and you can hate it, you can hate me, that's okay, but I want to protect your brain, and I care about you and your potential so much, I'm willing to be the bad guy and do that.
And that brain, what we're finding now that we have all of these new, opportunities for imaging and watching the brain function in real time, we're seeing that complete development of that judgment center of the brain isn't happening until about age 25. And what I find kind of interesting is when this sort of just clicked for me one day, the insurance companies have known that for a long time. Because if you look at their actuarials, you don't see a decrease in insurance premiums until age 25. So, they've known that for a long, long time. But, bottom line is, You know, we have a responsibility to our kids, I think, to keep them safe and healthy, and understand that they aren't fully mature at age 13, 14, 15, 16, like we once thought they were. They're not.
They're still kids.
They are.
Yeah.
They're still kids.
And good kids do dumb things. You know, it happens all the time. And risk taking is a normal part of growing up. It's a normal part of adolescence. But we want to encourage healthy risk taking.
Pink hair.
Pink hair, good. You know, trying out for a team you've never tried out for before. You know, switching gears and trying out for a play. You know, heading into the theater department when you've been on the athletic field. You know, try some of those healthier risks.
We were at a party where everybody, there was some of our kids there, and they'd ask the kids, what are some of the cliches that your parents have instilled in you to this day? And every one of my kids said, oh yeah, Dad always said as we were walking out the door, don't do anything stupid, don't, you know. And I was so touched with the fact that that is what they remembered, you know, as a foremost item. Don't go out and do anything stupid, you know. And fortunately, I'm not going to say it's worked. I'm going to say that their mother did a great job raising the kids. So, you know, but on the other side of the coin, that is kind of funny that happened.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, and I'm hoping that Ashley will pick this up from me, but kids don't think smoking marijuana is as stupid as they used to think.
I would say the news media helped neutralize a lot of that.
The legalization push in so many states, and it's the perception of harm is decreasing, and the acceptance for it is increasing, and so actually the majority of students feel like marijuana is actually an okay thing, a good thing, better than alcohol.
Oh, I was just going to say they consider it a lot better than alcohol.
Yeah.
And maybe Ashley can speak to what happens on the road and that the tests that are available for kids, reaction time and all that.
Well, I got a question before you start with
Go
that.
ahead.
What is the hostility level that you run into when you pull over a 16 to 18-year-old that is, I'm going to say, moderately inebriated or severely inebriated? I imagine
Or
there's different.
maybe using marijuana or something
Well,
like
we're
that.
going to come to that next. But
Okay.
seeing that Matt brought
You know
it up.
what? It really varies. A lot of times, you know, we don't have it really varies across the board as far as someone's behavior towards the police. You know, it's going to be generally, especially with an adolescent, typically if they're disrespectful when they're sober, they're going to be typically respectful if they're under the influence. A lot of times they're scared, not sure what's going to happen. We don't see a lot of kids drinking and driving. I mean, truthfully, our community, we don't, at least we don't apprehend a lot of people that are, but generally, you know, they can be on either side of the spectrum just like any other adult. When we deal with a juvenile under 18 years old that's been drinking and driving, it's much more complicated. We have to get the parents involved and make sure all these other things are taken care of versus just dealing with an adult that's kind of on their own
I
recognizance.
think the parents should get a recognition for that, because if our community is very minimal in that aspect, they have been doing their job.
Yes.
They've been raising their kids. And that's an important thing that they need to get
And
recognized.
I think, no, that's great. And I think a lot of times the parents really stress that fact. A lot of kids know that their parents are not okay with them drinking and driving. Now we just want to take that and have the same importance as far as just using in general. So we're trying to eliminate the ideas of the parents, like, oh, we're going to create a safe environment for the kids to drink because I would rather have them here than any other place. Those days are long gone, and we want them to have the same perspective about using as they do drinking and driving. So that's part of our plan with the Most FL Coalition, is to educate the parents.
Now, getting back to Matt's statement about marijuana.
Driving high.
Yeah, driving high. What are there similarities? The floor is
Yeah.
yours. Give us a whole cross section.
A lot of juveniles really think that they have, they know all their rights and things like that. And what they don't understand is as soon as we smell marijuana in the car, that gives us the right to search the vehicle. So marijuana is very potent. The smell is very potent. And so if a juvenile or an adult for that matter had just gotten done smoking it recently, or they have some still in their possession, or maybe just simply paraphernalia in the car, we can generally smell that right away. And a lot of times people are honest about that if we ask them, maybe not right away, but if we kind of tell them we know what it smells like, I can smell it, who has it, generally they're cooperative, and it can lead to a search of their car and their person.
I see. Do you confiscate the vehicles?
No, not for marijuana.
Not for
Unless
marijuana.
it was...
Pounds?
I haven't caught the mother load myself yet. So.
Pounds. Okay. Well, with that being said, we are going to have to end this segment, and unfortunately we're going to be losing Matt as one of our members of the group here, which I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing with us and giving us your input.
You bet.
And I hate to say this, but I hope no parent in Forest Lake has to come and see you.
Right.
And
Respectfully taken. Respectfully taken.
Respectfully taken. And I really appreciate the efforts that you're bringing forth. When Youth Service Bureau was started, I happen to know the founder of it extremely well. So that means I've been around a long time. But with that being said, would you like to close and give anything to the viewing audience so that you can
Sure. Yeah. We in the prevention field are just so passionate about what we do, and we need your help. We need your help to be talking to your kids and getting that conversation started, because we can't do that. You're the one with all of the power, with the influence. We are kind of players off to the side, but what happens in the home is really the most critical piece. And so start those conversations early with your kids, and often find out who they're with and where they're going. Be on top of those things if you're not already, and really get involved in their lives. And sometimes the best anti-drug or alcohol thing that you can do for them is to love them, respect them, spend time with them, and build into your relationship with them. And so that would be one of my biggest messages, is just that if you do all those things, you probably will never come and see me. But if you do, we'll treat you well, we'll treat you kindly, and I promise we won't bite. So thanks.
Well, with that being said, this is going to end the first segment. As I told all of you that we were going to have other segments of this, we will. And please, in the future, watch the next segment of this overall program, because after all, this is for you, the parents of Forest Lake and the surrounding areas. We thank you for watching this segment, and we hope that you watch the next. Thank you once again.